At 3:40 in the morning on the 31st of January, 1968, temple bells ring across Hue, Thua Tien Province. Thousands of worshippers fill the pagodas for the Lunar New Year. Within 20 minutes, 8,000 People's Army of Vietnam and Viet Cong soldiers emerge from basements and safe houses. They seize 30 key objectives: district headquarters, the radio station, Truong Tien Bridge. Before most defenders finish breakfast, the Jai Noi Citadel falls to a battalion that materializes inside the walls. Tai Loc Airfield goes silent. Highway 1 convoys stop. Communication lines die. Hue, the city every planner calls safe, becomes the longest urban battle of the war. The temple bells that welcome the new year now mark the collapse of every assumption. Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, MACV, and Army of the Republic of Vietnam intelligence officers classify Hue as a Category 3 security zone, low threat, rear echelon safe. The 1st ARVN Division maintains skeleton forces inside the city. Most combat battalions deploy to fire bases west of Hue. American advisors and reporters rent villas in the Gia Hoi district, treating the ancient capital as Saigon's quieter cousin. Regional forces and popular forces, RF, PF militiamen, guard checkpoints with carbines. Pre-Tet leave sends half the division home. The assumption holds: the enemy cannot coordinate large-scale attacks inside a heavily populated city without detection. Hue's tranquility becomes doctrine, and doctrine becomes the blind spot that costs 26 days to close. Between November 1967 and January 1968, the Tri Thien Hue Front moves 10,000 fighters into staging areas within 15 kilometers of Hue. Cadres enter the city in groups of 2 or 3, posing as students, merchants, and holiday travelers. Each carries false papers issued by Viet Cong infrastructure cells. Safe houses in the Gia Hoi and Vida wards shelter arriving troops and pre-positioned weapons caches. The 6th PAVN Regiment infiltrates from base. Area 114 in the A Shao Valley, moving at night through jungle corridors that American sensors cannot cover. The 4th and 5th PAVN Regiments approach from the northwest, crossing the Perfume River on sampans invisible to aerial reconnaissance. Local Viet Cong battalions, K4B, K4C, 12th Sapper, coordinate with PAVN regulars, providing guides, maps, and target folders for every government building. Weapons arrive in rice sacks, coffins, and vegetable carts. AK-47 rifles, B-40 rockets, and satchel charges hide beneath Tet offerings and incense bundles. The Hue City Party Committee compiles target lists: ARVN headquarters, the province chief's residence, the radio station, the treasury, Truong Tien Bridge, the American compound. Reconnaissance teams sketch fields of fire, photograph guard rotations, and measure wall thicknesses at the Jai Noi Citadel. MACV intelligence detects increased radio traffic in Thua Thien Province during mid-January, but attributes it to normal Tet movement. The 1st ARVN Division, G2, notes refugee flows from western hamlets, but lacks manpower to investigate. On the 30th of January, a captured PAVN soldier warns of a coordinated offensive. The warning reaches Saigon, but not field commanders in Hue before the attack begins. Weather plays into PAVN planning. The northeast monsoon drops cloud ceilings to 300 feet, grounding American helicopters and tactical air support. The Tri Thien Hue Front synchronizes H-hour across all units for 3:40 in the morning on the 31st of January, the moment when Tet celebrations peak and guard rotations change. Signal flares launch from the Perfume River's south bank. Temple bells, rung by Viet Cong sappers who silence the monks, become the attack signal. Within 20 minutes, PAVN squads control 30 objectives. Within 2 hours, the imperial flag flies over the Citadel's Ngo Mon Gate. The infiltration relies on clandestine prepositioning, urban cover, and the assumption that no enemy would dare strike Hugh. ARVN and MACV planners believe large formations require trucks, artillery, and supply depots, all visible to reconnaissance. The Tri-Thien Hue front proves that 8,000 soldiers can hide inside a city of 140,000 civilians if the city expects peace. At 3:40 in the morning on the 31st of January, 1968, the 6th PAVN Regiment storms the Jai Noi Citadel from positions inside the Gia Hoi Ward, less than 500 meters from the eastern wall. Sappers cut through barbed wire at the Jong Ba Gate, while diversionary fire pins ARVN guards at Tai Lok Airfield on the Citadel's north side. Within 90 minutes, PAVN infantry raised the National Liberation Front flag over the 37-meter flagpole at Ngo Mon Gate, visible across the city. The 1st ARVN Division headquarters, located inside the Citadel compound, becomes an island. Brigadier General Ngo Quang Truong and his staff barricade themselves in the operations center with 200 soldiers. Communication lines to MACV and Phu Bai, 8 kilometers south, go dead. Runners crossing the Perfume River take sniper fire. Truong's division, 10 infantry battalions strong, is scattered across Thua Thien province. Only the 3rd Regiment's Reconnaissance Company and the Hak Bao, Black Panther, Elite Reaction Company remain inside Hue. The Hak Bao, 200 men armed with M16 rifles and M79 grenade launchers, counterattacks at dawn but cannot break through PAVN positions dug into residential blocks. The PAVN 6th Regiment occupies the Imperial Palace grounds, converts the Hall of Supreme Harmony into a command post, and emplaces 12.7mm machine guns on the Obi Citadel's ramparts. Tai Lok Airfield falls to the 800th Battalion. ARVN engineers blow the runway to deny its use, but the damage also prevents relief flights. South of the Perfume River, the 4th PAVN Regiment seizes Truong Tien Bridge, the only road link between the Citadel and MACV's advisory compound in the Gia Hoi district. The compound, home to 200 American advisors and Australian Army training team members, holds behind sandbagged walls while B-40 rockets crater the courtyard. Captain James Coolican, the compound's senior advisor, radios Phu Bai for reinforcement. The reply warns that Route 1, the main highway, is cut by enemy ambushes at 4 points. Major Frank Breath, operations officer for the MACV advisory team, recalls the morning, "We thought it was a raid, a big raid, but a raid. Then the flag went up over the Citadel and we understood. They're not leaving." The 12th Viet Cong Sapper Battalion targets Hue University, seizing dormitories that overlook the southern approach to Truong Tien Bridge. Students and faculty shelter in basements. Some are detained and marched to interrogation sites in the Phu Cam district. The provincial prison, holding 2,500 inmates, opens. Guards flee and prisoners scatter into the chaos. By noon on the 31st of January, PAVN and Viet Cong forces control 80% of Hue, including the provincial headquarters, the treasury, the radio station, and the central market. The 1st ARVN Division remains trapped inside its headquarters. The MACV compound holds but cannot maneuver. RFPF outposts in the southern wards collapse or surrender. Weather ceilings drop to 500 feet, grounding Marine Corps helicopter gunships and Air Force close air support. Only artillery from Phu Bai can reach Hue, and fires must avoid the Citadel's historic walls. Brigadier General Foster C. La Hue, commanding Task Force X-Ray, the Marine Command for Northern Tha Corps, receives reports at 7 in the morning and orders the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, to move north from Phu Bai. The battalion, 800 men in trucks and Amtraks, hits the first ambush at the Phu Bai railroad crossing. The convoy takes 2 hours to cover 8 kilometers. By evening, 1 Marines reaches the MACV compound and establishes a perimeter, but the Citadel remains cut off. Truong's staff counts 1,200 ARVN soldiers inside the headquarters compound, facing an estimated 2,500 PAVN troops dug into the Citadel's streets. Ammunition runs low. The Hakbao Company expends 70% of its grenades in failed counterattacks on the 1st of February. PAVN snipers occupy the Citadel's watchtowers and pagoda roofs, forcing ARVN movement into covered alleys. Civilians trapped inside the Citadel's shelter in family tombs, pagodas, and basements. The city's water supply fails when PAVN sappers damage the pumping station. Radio Hue, seized by Viet Cong cadres, broadcasts surrender demands and reads names of government officials targeted for arrest. The broadcasts name province chiefs, police commanders, and school teachers. Over the next 26 days, mass graves will reveal the cost of those lists. On the 2nd of February, MACV intelligence revises its estimate. 8,000 to 10,000 enemy soldiers now operate inside or around Hue. The revision stuns American planners, who believed large-scale urban attacks required visible logistics trains. Not armor columns or artillery preparation, but silent pre-positioning inside the city itself. On the 2nd of February, 1968, Task Force X-Ray orders the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, 1-5 Marines, to clear the southern wards of Hue, beginning with the Truong Tien Bridge approach. Captain Myron Harrington's Alpha Company leads the assault, advancing through the Gia Hoi district where PAVN snipers occupy French colonial villas and walled compounds. The Marines fight house to house, breaching walls with C4 explosive charges and clearing rooms with grenades. Progress measures 100 meters per hour. The 4th PAVN Regiment, dug into prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire, contests every block. Harrington recalls the opening minutes of the urban fight. We trained for jungle. This was concrete, alleys, civilians in every doorway. The enemy knew every firing lane. We learned them dying. Marine squads, each with 13 riflemen, lose cohesion in the maze of narrow streets. Squad leaders resort to hand signals because radio traffic clogs the battalion net. PAVN soldiers occupy upper floors, forcing Marines to clear vertically. Grenades upstairs, then rifle fire, then entry. The rules of engagement prohibit artillery and airstrikes within 500 meters of the MACV compound without direct visual confirmation of enemy positions. Forward air controllers, flying OV-10 Broncos beneath 300-foot cloud ceilings, struggle to identify targets through smoke and rain. On the 3rd of February, 1-5 Marines secures the Hue Provincial Headquarters after a 6-hour firefight. The building's interior is a maze of ransacked files and shattered furniture. The PAVN 4th Regiment withdraws 200 meters west, fortifying positions around Tai Lok Airfield and the Citadel's outer walls. Marine casualties climb. 1-5 Marines reports 47 wounded and 10 killed in the first 3 days. Resupply convoys from Phu Bai run a gauntlet of ambushes. Each convoy requires infantry escort and medevac helicopters on standby. South of the Perfume River, the Marines battle through the University District, where Viet Cong sappers have mined intersections and booby-trapped abandoned buildings. The 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, 2-5 Marines, arrives on the 4th of February, doubling the American infantry force south of the river. Lieutenant is Colonel Ernie Cheatham, commanding 2-5 Marines, coordinates with ARVN units to isolate PAVN escape routes toward the western hills. Cheatham's battalion takes over the Citadel assault mission on the 10th of February, crossing the Perfume River on Amtraks under heavy fire. The Citadel fight introduces a new complexity. The ancient walls, 4 meters thick and 10 meters high, block direct assault. Marine engineers breached the Jong Ba Gate on the 11th of February, using 500 pounds of C4. The explosion opens a 6-meter gap but alerts PAVN defenders to the attack axis. Inside the Citadel, 2-5 Marines advances 50 meters per day, clearing block by block through residential neighborhoods where every home becomes a bunker. PAVN infantry occupy the Imperial Palace complex, turning throne rooms and courtyards into fighting positions. The Marines employ M48 Patton tanks, borrowed from the 1st Tank Battalion, to suppress rooftop snipers. The tanks fire 90mm high-explosive rounds at point-blank range. ARVN forces, reinforced by the 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 3rd Regiment, clear the Citadel's southern quarters, while the Marines push west toward the palace. Brigadier General Nungo Quang Truong, freed from his besieged headquarters on the 12th of February, coordinates the ARVN effort from a forward command post near Tai Lok airfield. Truong later describes the Citadel operation. "We fought for every meter. The enemy prepared for months. We reclaimed our city in weeks. The cost was written in rubble and blood." The weather lifts on the 14th of February, allowing Marine Corps F-4 Phantoms to strike PAVN positions with 500-pound bombs. The strikes crater streets and collapse walls, but also damage Hugh's historic architecture. The Citadel's Thai Hoa Palace, a 19th-century relic, takes direct hits. Fires consume wooden beams and tile roofs. MACV and ARVN commanders face a dilemma: preserve Hugh's heritage or expel the enemy. They choose expulsion. By the 20th of February, artillery from Phu Bai fires 1,000 rounds per day into the Citadel's western sectors. PAVN resistance stiffens as the perimeter shrinks. The 6th Regiment abandons the Imperial Palace on the 22nd of February, but holds a final line along the Citadel's western wall. Marine and ARVN infantry storm the wall on the 24th of February, supported by Ontos tracked vehicles mounting 6 106mm recoilless rifles. The Ontos fire at close range, collapsing buildings and forcing PAVN soldiers into retreat. By the 25th of February, the Citadel is clear. The NLF flag comes down from No Mon Gate, and the Republic of Vietnam's yellow and red banner rises in its place. Not a conventional assault MACV could detect and defeat, but a clandestine operation that turns a city into a battlefield. The weapons that arm 8,000 PAVN and Viet Cong soldiers inside Hue on the 31st of January, 1968, do not arrive on trucks or sampans the night before the attack. They arrive over 3 months, hidden in caches beneath pagodas, buried in gardens, stored in false-bottomed fishing boats moored along the Perfume River. The 6th PAVN Regiment's AK-47 rifles, B-40 rocket launchers, and 82mm mortar tubes enter Hue in rice sacks and coffins, transported during daylight when ARVN checkpoints expect Tet traffic. Local Viet Cong infrastructure, operating through the Hue City Party Committee, coordinates storage sites with sympathetic families, students, and shop owners. A Viet Cong cadre named Le Min, interviewed after the war, describes the preparation. "We stored ammunition beneath altars, weapons in family tombs. The people understood. Tet was not just celebration, it was revolution." The Tri-Thien Hue Front issues detailed target folders to every PAVN company. Each folder contains maps, guard schedules, and breach points for assigned objectives. Reconnaissance teams enter Hue in November and December 1967, posing as university students or seasonal workers. They photograph ARVN checkpoints, measure distances, and sketch fields of fire. One cache, discovered by Marines on the 6th of February, holds 200 AK-47s, 15,000 rounds of 7.62mm ammunition, 40 B-40 rockets, and 100 kilograms of TNT beneath a Buddhist pagoda in the Vidar ward. Another cache, found in a villa rented by an alleged textile merchant, contains radio equipment, code books, and target maps for the 4th PAVN Regiment. The caches enable the attack speed. PAVN soldiers armed themselves from pre-positioned stocks, and move to objectives without logistical tails. American intelligence, focused on interdicting infiltration along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the Shao Valley, misses the urban network. MACV aerial reconnaissance photographs truck parks and storage depots in Laos, but cannot detect weapons buried 3 feet underground inside Hugh's city limits. Signals intelligence intercepts radio traffic in the Shao, but not the courier networks that use no radios, only hand-delivered messages and prearranged signals. The RFPF units assigned to Hugh's checkpoints lack the manpower and training to search every vehicle. A 3-man checkpoint inspects 1 cart in 10 during peak Tet travel. Sergeant Nguyen Van Hao, an RF platoon leader in the Pu Cam district, recalls the pre-attack days. "We saw more people, more carts. Every family traveled for Tet. How could we search them all? We looked for weapons on top. They hid them underneath." The infiltration exploits cultural rhythms. Tet celebrations, family reunions, and religious pilgrimages create legitimate cover for movement. PAVN officers study Hugh's patterns for months, timing infiltration to coincide with the week when half the ARVN 1st Division takes leave. The division's 2nd and 7th Regiments deploy to fire bases west of Hues. The 1st and 3rd Regiments maintain minimal presence inside the city. On the 30th of January, the 1st ARVN Division headquarters counts 1,200 soldiers in Hue. The PAVN Tri-Thien Hue front counts 8,000 within striking distance. The imbalance, invisible to American intelligence until the attack begins, reflects a failure of assumption. MACV believes large forces require large logistic signatures. The PAVN model proves otherwise. Small, dispersed caches and infiltration by stealth negate the need for visible supply lines. Hugh's urban density aids concealment. A battalion can hide in 50 houses, a company in 10. The population, 140,000 strong, provides cover. PAVN soldiers in civilian clothes blend into crowds. The Tri-Thien He front also exploits ARVN vulnerabilities. Fragmented command, inadequate urban defense doctrine, and the assumption that cities require less firepower than jungles. The 1st ARVN Division's fire support base system, optimized for blocking infiltration from the Shao, leaves Hue defended by light infantry and militiamen. PAVN planners calculate that ARVN will need days to mass counterattack forces. That delay allows PAVN to consolidate control and fortify positions. The calculation holds. Reinforcements from the 1st ARVN Division's western fire bases require 48 hours to redeploy, delayed by ambushes and damaged bridges. American reaction time stretches longer. 1-1 Marines takes 12 hours to move 8 kilometers from Pu Bai to Hue on the 31st of January. The weapons caches also hold political value. Every cache discovered by Marines or ARVN validates PAVN claims of local support. Brigadier General Foster LaHue, reviewing post-battle intelligence, notes, "They didn't invade Hue. They were already there. The city hid them, fed them, armed them. We fought 3 months of preparation in 3 weeks of hell." The pre-positioning also explains PAVN resilience. Even as casualties mount, ammunition remains available from secondary caches. On the 10th of February, as 2-5 Marines breaches the Citadel, PAVN soldiers retrieve grenades and rockets from a cache inside the Imperial Palace complex. Not firepower from outside the city, but preparation inside it. On the 1st of February, 1968, as the first Marine reinforcements reach Hue, American television networks receive film footage of PAVN soldiers raising the National Liberation Front flag over the Citadel. The images, broadcast across the United States by the 2nd of February, contradict every MACV briefing that describes the Tet Offensive as a series of isolated raids. Hue, the ancient imperial capital, becomes the visual center of a narrative about American vulnerability and enemy audacity. Peter Breistrup, covering the battle for the Washington Post, files dispatches that emphasize chaos, surprise, and the collapse of rear area security. He writes that the battle shatters the illusion of progress and control, a theme that dominates American media coverage of Tet. Braystrup later reflects, "Hugh was the story, not just the fight. Everyone understood fighting. It was the shock. How did they get in?" That question changed everything. The perception break begins with infiltration but amplifies through duration. The battle lasts 26 days, longer than any previous engagement in the war. MACV's daily briefings in Saigon acknowledge heavy fighting but avoid the term siege, preferring clearing operations. The semantic evasion fails. Reporters in Hugh describe surrounded ARVN units, street-by-street advances, and civilian casualties. By the 10th of February, the narrative solidifies. Hugh is not a battle. MACV is winning quickly, but a protracted urban grind. General William Westmoreland, commanding MACV, publicly downplays Hugh's significance, calling it a diversion from the enemy's failed attempts to seize larger cities like Saigon. The public sees otherwise. Footage of Marines storming fortified buildings, ARVN troops under fire, and refugees fleeing through rubble dominates nightly newscasts. The perception gap between official optimism and visible reality widens with each passing day. On the 14th of February, CBS News correspondent John Lawrence embeds with 2-5 Marines inside the Citadel. His reports show Marines pinned by sniper fire, calling for artillery support against positions 50 meters away. The close-quarters brutality, unusual in a war fought mostly in jungles and rice paddies, shocks American audiences. The battle also reveals the cost of urban combat. By the 20th of February, Marine casualties exceed 100 killed and 600 wounded. Numbers comparable to major operations like Hill 881 South in 1967. The casualty rate, concentrated in a single city over 3 weeks, challenges MACV's narrative that the Tet Offensive is a strategic failure for Hanoi. Senator Robert Kennedy, campaigning for the Democratic presidential nomination, cites Hugh as evidence that the war is unwinnable. His speeches in February 1968 invoke the city's destruction as a symbol of policy failure. The infiltration itself becomes a subject of congressional inquiry. How did 8,000 enemy soldiers mass inside a city classified as secure? MACV acknowledges intelligence gaps, but insists that the Tet Offensive's tactical defeat offsets any strategic surprise. The argument fails to persuade skeptics. Hugh's 26-day battle and 5,000 enemy casualties matter less than the fact that the attack happened at all. The perception break extends to South Vietnam's government. Hugh exposes the fragility of ARVN's urban defenses and the Viet Cong infrastructure's reach. Refugees fleeing the city report Viet Cong, cadres operating openly, arresting officials, and executing collaborators. Proof that the insurgency thrives in populated areas, not just rural hamlets. The mass graves discovered after the 25th of February, between 2,000 and 3,000 civilians executed during the occupation, add a grim coda to the battle. MACV uses the graves to argue that PAVN and Viet Cong brutality justifies American intervention, but the images of destruction and death overwhelm that narrative. Hugh's rubble, broadcast worldwide, symbolizes the war's cost. Entire neighborhoods leveled, the Citadel scarred, and 116,000 residents displaced. The destruction raises a question that haunts American policymakers. If retaking a city requires this much firepower, can South Vietnam survive the defense? The perception break peaks on the 27th of February when CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite broadcasts an editorial calling the war a stalemate. Cronkite cites Hugh and the broader Tet Offensive as evidence that victory, as defined by MACV, is unattainable. President Lyndon Johnson, watching the broadcast, reportedly says, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." Hugh becomes the battle that shifts elite opinion. Journalists, senators, and television anchors who once supported the war now question its trajectory. The infiltration, the surprise, the 26-day fight, and the rubble combine to break the perception that the war is being won. Not a military defeat, but a collapse of confidence in the strategy itself. The battle for Hugh lasts 26 days. Marine casualties total 147 killed and 857 wounded. ARVN losses reach 384 killed and 1,830 wounded. PAVN and Việt Cộng losses exceed 5,000 killed, captured, or missing. Civilians bear the heaviest toll. Between 2,600 and 2,800 confirmed dead, 116,000 refugees, and entire wards reduced to rubble. The recapture succeeds through combined arms, Marine infantry, ARVN resilience, and American artillery and air power. Yet the opening infiltration reshapes American perceptions of the war. The infiltration that delivers Hugh to the People's Army of Vietnam on the 31st of January, 1968, is not a tactical accident. It is the result of a 3-month campaign of clandestine preparation that exploits every assumption MACV and ARVN hold about urban warfare. The Tri-Thien Hue Front studies Hugh's rhythms, maps its vulnerabilities, and prepositions weapons in a city that believes itself safe. The success of that infiltration, measured in the 20 minutes it takes to seize 30 objectives, exposes a gap between American doctrine and enemy capability. MACV's intelligence apparatus, optimized for detecting conventional forces along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and A Shao Valley, cannot see an enemy that infiltrates 2 soldiers at a time over 3 months. The 1st ARVN Division's defensive posture, designed to block infiltration from the west, leaves the city itself defended by militiamen with carbines and ARVN soldiers on holiday leave. The battle that follows the infiltration reshapes the war in 3 ways. First, it forces a doctrinal reckoning. Urban combat, previously treated as a secondary concern, becomes a priority for training and planning. MACV invests in urban warfare schools, coordinates with South Vietnam's police and paramilitary forces, and revises intelligence collection priorities to include city surveillance. The lessons from Hugh, room-to-room clearing, combined arms coordination in confined spaces, rules of engagement that balance firepower with civilian protection, filter into Marine Corps and Army training cycles by mid-1968. The urban fight becomes a recognized dimension of counterinsurgency, no longer dismissed as a tactical anomaly. Second, the infiltration validates PAVN strategic thinking. Large-scale attacks inside cities do not require visible logistics or conventional assault columns. The model of dispersed caches, civilian cover, and coordinated H-hour synchronization across multiple objectives proves that insurgent forces can operate at division scale inside population centers without triggering the intelligence signatures MACV relies on. The implications extend beyond Hugh. If 8,000 soldiers can hide in a city of 140,000, no urban area in South Vietnam can be considered secure by default. The assumption of rear area safety collapses, forcing MACV to divert resources from rural interdiction to urban defense. The strategic cost is measured in battalions redeployed, fire bases thinned, and patrol schedules disrupted across I-Corps. Third, the perception breakout lasts the battle itself. The 26-day fight, broadcast nightly into American living rooms, becomes the visual and narrative center of the Tet Offensive. Hugh's destruction, entire neighborhoods leveled, the Citadel scarred, the Imperial Palace burned, symbolizes the war's intractable nature. The images of Marines storming fortified buildings, ARVN troops fighting street by street, and refugees fleeing through rubble challenge MACV's narrative of progress and control. The gap between official optimism and visible reality widens with each passing day of combat. By the time the Republic of Vietnam's flag rises over No Mon Gate on the 25th of February, the tactical victory cannot reverse the strategic perception shift. Hue becomes the battle that breaks confidence in the war's trajectory, not because it is lost, but because it reveals how fragile the assumptions underpinning American strategy have become. The infiltration also exposes the limits of technology. MACV's intelligence network, aerial reconnaissance, signals intercepts, sensors along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, fails to detect 8,000 soldiers moving into Hue over 3 months. The failure is not one of capability, but of focus. The intelligence apparatus looks for trucks, artillery, and supply depots, not rice carts, coffins, and false-bottomed boats. The PAVN Hue front exploits that focus, using low-signature infiltration methods that bypass American technological advantages. The lesson is clear. An enemy that understands the intelligence system can defeat it without jamming a single radio or shooting down a single reconnaissance plane. The infiltration succeeds because it operates beneath the threshold of detection, hidden in plain sight among the civilian population. The human cost of the infiltration and subsequent battle extends beyond the combatants. The confirmed civilian dead, between 2,600 and 2,800, include victims of PAVN and Viet Cong executions, province officials, police commanders, school teachers, and intellectuals targeted during the occupation. The mass graves discovered after the 25th of February revealed the price of PAVN's political consolidation efforts. Anyone associated with the South Vietnamese government becomes a target. The executions add a grim dimension to the battle's legacy, complicating narratives that focus solely on American firepower, or ARVN resilience. The Viet Cong infrastructure, operating openly during the 26-day occupation, demonstrates its reach and ruthlessness. The executions also serve as a warning. Cities are not sanctuaries from the war's violence, and populations cannot remain neutral. The battle's duration, 26 days, matters because it contradicts MACV's expectations of rapid resolution. American planners assume that superior firepower, air support, and mobility will allow rapid urban clearance. The reality proves otherwise. PAVN soldiers, dug into fortified positions with prepared fields of fire, resist despite overwhelming firepower. The fight for the Citadel advances 50 meters per day, not 500. The Marines and ARVN pay for every block in blood, ammunition, and time. The protracted combat exhausts units, strains logistics, and exposes the limits of conventional tactics in urban terrain. The duration also amplifies media coverage. A 26-day battle gives reporters time to embed, film, and transmit footage that shapes public perception far beyond Hue's walls. The temple bells that ring at 3:40 in the morning on the 31st of January mark the beginning of the infiltration's culmination. But they also mark the end of an assumption that Hue, the imperial city, the cultural heart of Vietnam, is too important, too visible, too well guarded to fall. The bells, rung by Viet Cong sappers who silence the monks, become the signal for an attack that has been preparing for 3 months. The bells echo across the city, summoning not worshippers, but soldiers who emerge from hiding. Places mapped and rehearsed weeks in advance. The symbolism is deliberate. Tet, the celebration of renewal, becomes the moment of revolution. The bells that once called the faithful now announce the collapse of security, the failure of intelligence, and the beginning of a battle that will reshape perceptions of the war. The infiltration and the battle that follows prove that perception, not territory, decides strategic outcomes. MACV and ARVN reclaim Hue after 26 days, but the victory cannot erase the fact that 8,000 enemy soldiers seized the city in 20 minutes. The recapture succeeds through firepower, resilience, and sacrifice, but it cannot restore the assumption of safety that the infiltration shattered. The perception break, captured in footage of the NLF flag over the Citadel, in reports of surrounded ARVN units, in images of refugees fleeing through rubble, outlasts the battle and reshapes the war's trajectory. Hugh becomes the city that fell without a shot and fought for a month, the battle where infiltration decided the opening and firepower decided the ending, but perception decided the meaning. The lessons from Hugh ripple through American and South Vietnamese military planning for the remainder of the war. MACV establishes urban warfare training centers, revises intelligence collection protocols to include city surveillance, and coordinates with South Vietnam's national police and territorial forces to monitor population movements. The 1st ARVN Division, rebuilt after Hugh, adopts defensive postures that balance fire-based security with urban rapid reaction forces. The Marines incorporate urban combat tactics into training cycles at Camp Pendleton and Quantico, drawing directly from after-action reports filed by 1-5 Marines, 2-5 Marines, and Task Force X-Ray. The rules of engagement for indirect fire inside cities evolve, balancing the need for firepower with civilian protection, a tension that defines urban operations through the war's end. The infiltration model pioneered at Hugh does not repeat on the same scale. PAVN and Việt Cộng forces attempt similar urban offensives during the second wave of Tet in May 1968 and the mini-Tet of 1969, but improved American and ARVN intelligence disrupts preparation. Weapons caches are discovered before attacks launch. Infiltrators are detected and detained. HR coordination fails under surveillance pressure. The infiltration that succeeds at Hugh in January 1968 exploits a one-time window of assumption and neglect that closes after the battle. The Tri-Thien Huy front cannot replicate the conditions. 3 months of undetected preparation, a city on holiday leave, weather that grounds air support, that enable the initial success. The political impact of Hugh extends beyond military planning. The battle becomes a reference point in congressional debates, media coverage, and public discourse about the war's direction. The question, "How did they get in?" dominates hearings and editorials, forcing MACV to acknowledge intelligence failures and doctrinal gaps. The perception that Hugh represents a strategic setback persists despite the tactical recapture. The city's destruction, broadcast worldwide, symbolizes the war's cost in ways that jungle firefights and fire-based defenses do not. Hugh becomes shorthand for the gap between official narrative and visible reality, a gap that widens through 1968 and accelerates the shift in American public opinion. The temple bells that ring at 3:40 in the morning on the 31st of January, 1968, mark the moment when perception and reality collide. The infiltration exposes assumptions. The battle tests doctrine. The aftermath reshapes strategy. Hugh falls in 20 minutes and fights for 26 days, but the perception break lasts far longer, echoing through the war's final years and beyond. Perception fails fast when assumptions replace vigilance. Hugh teaches that no city is safe by default, no intelligence network infallible, no doctrine immune to enemy adaptation. The infiltration succeeds because planners believe large forces require visible logistics. The battle lasts 26 days because urban combat defies expectations of rapid resolution. The lesson endures. Security depends on preparedness, not assumption. The cost of neglecting that lesson is measured in temple bells rung by the enemy, flags raised over fallen citadels, and 26 days of fighting to reclaim what 20 minutes lost. Perception fails fast. Preparedness decides survival.